He had seen battlefields, he had faced death, and he had commanded men through storms of gunfire. Nothing ever shook the general. But one quiet evening when he decided to follow a soldier after hours, he stumbled into a truth no strategy could prepare him for. What he witnessed that night was not written in reports, not whispered in the barracks. It was a secret life, hidden behind the uniform. And when the general saw it with his own eyes, the weight of command suddenly felt heavier than any war he had fought. The general was a man of discipline, forged by decades of service. His days were filled with drills, briefings, and the unending rhythm of military order. To him, soldiers were not just names on a roster, they were lives entrusted to his leadership. But still, there was a distance. Generals commanded, soldiers obeyed, and the gap between rank was rarely crossed. One soldier, however, had caught his attention, Private Daniels. He was young, sharp, and diligent, always the first to arrive, always the last to complain. On paper, he was the model recruit. Yet the general couldn't shake the feeling that something was hidden beneath his steady composure. Rumors had circulated quietly. Some said Daniels never slept properly. Others noticed his eyes carried shadows deeper than exhaustion. The general dismissed it at first. After all, every soldier bore scars unseen. But one evening, after the day's drills had ended, instinct pulled him in a different direction. Instead of retiring to his quarters, he lingered by the barracks and waited. And when Daniels slipped out alone, under the dim glow of the base lights, the general followed. The young soldier walked with purpose, but not toward town or entertainment. He didn't carry the carefree stride of men seeking laughter or escape. Instead, his steps were heavy, deliberate, as if each one pulled him deeper into something he wanted hidden. The general trailed him quietly, careful to remain unseen. They passed the perimeter fence, the silence broken only by the crunch of gravel under boots. Daniels carried a small duffel bag, worn, old, patched at the edges. Minutes turned into nearly an hour as they moved away from the base. Finally, Daniels stopped at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts. The general's brow furrowed. Was this contraband, secret meetings, desertion? His heart beat with suspicion. Inside, however, the truth began to unfold. The soldier opened the duffel bag. From it, he pulled not weapons or alcohol, but notebooks, tattered pencils, and sheets of paper filled with careful writing. He lit a small lantern and began to write furiously, as though every word carried his soul. The general crept closer, and then he saw it, drawings too. Faces of children, landscapes of a peaceful countryside, poems scribbled in margins. Words of longing, words of grief, words of memories that had no place in a soldier's life yet poured out in silence. But that wasn't all. After writing, Daniels set the papers aside and retrieved old photographs. He stared at them, eyes wet, lips trembling. A woman, a child, family left behind, perhaps forever. The general's chest tightened. This was no act of rebellion. This was survival of another kind, the kind that kept a young man's humanity intact in a world that tried to strip it away. Still, he waited, hidden in the shadows, as Daniels lowered his head into his hands. Silent sobs shook the soldier's frame. The general had seen men die with bravery, but here was a soldier fighting a war no one spoke of, alone, unseen, and unrecorded. The general stepped forward. The floor creaked beneath his boots, startling the young soldier. Daniels shot up, eyes wide with panic, shame written across his face. The duffel bag snapped shut as though hiding the evidence of weakness. "Sir," Daniels stammered, standing at attention, tears still clinging to his eyes. But the general didn't reprimand him. He didn't demand explanations or threaten punishment. He simply stood there, eyes scanning the scraps of poetry, the faded photographs, the desperate sketches of a life once whole. And then something broke inside the general. The man who had spent decades building walls of steel around his heart felt them crumble. For the first time in years, he saw not just a soldier, but a son. Not just discipline, but vulnerability. Not just obedience, but the silent cry of a human being carrying more than his share of pain. His throat tightened, his chest ached, and before he could stop himself, his eyes filled. The seasoned general, battle-hardened, unflinching, found tears tracing his face in the dim glow of the lantern. It wasn't weakness, it was recognition. Recognition of the invisible battles his men fought, the ones no medal could honor. The next morning, Daniels reported to duty as if nothing had happened. His uniform was crisp, his salute sharp. But when their eyes met, a silent understanding passed between them. The general never spoke of that night. He didn't need to. Instead, he carried it with him, into every order he gave, every decision he made. From that moment on, he no longer saw soldiers as faceless units, but as men with hidden wars carved deep within them. In meetings, he listened longer. On inspections, his gaze lingered softer. And when he walked among the ranks, he looked past the uniforms and saw the fragile humanity beating beneath. Daniels continued his secret ritual, but no longer in fear. The general had seen, and instead of judgment, he had given silent permission for humanity to coexist with duty. Years later, when people spoke of the general's legacy, they praised his strategies, his victories, his medals. But the true victory was something unseen. The moment he chose compassion over command, empathy over indifference. Because sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought on distant fields. They are fought in silence, in the shadows of memory, in the fragile spaces of the human heart. And the general would forever carry the memory of the night he followed his soldier, only to find a secret life that taught him the meaning of true strength.